Good afternoon. I know it's been a while since I spoke to you live, and I want to thank you guys for being the best small audience that you are. No, seriously, it's. I think it's good to have at least people that are, loyal following, and also who are, I guess, not afraid to say what they really feel. I know a few of you might be wondering why is it that more recently it's been more, reviews, videos that are not exactly current events. So I think the whole news YouTube thing is starting to peter out. There's not as much activity on it. I'd certainly say that I really depend on only two channels for it, which would be Sticks, Hex, and Hammer and Tim Pool. So I'm not sure really how much it would be worth to do either shows or videos every day on the news. So instead, I'm just going to comment on things that I find either amusing or that I think are really important. And I guess we'll start off with Sesame Street publishing featuring this character. And I got a lot of flack on it because I shared a video where I really, really laughed at this. I thought it's hilarious. Now, I understand that the topic is serious. The newest Sesame Street Muppet has a mom struggling to overcome addiction. I thought that this character, both making a Muppet out of it and even having it on Sesame Street, I thought it was the funniest thing ever. And people were saying to me, no, you don't understand. Kids have to learn how, it's good because it's counseling them on addiction. I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just saying that the character is hilarious. And let me see if they even have on this video, if they play some of the audio, because it's like, to somebody who's already an adult, this sounds just kind of ridiculous.
Social media is a little split about this morning. We want to hear your take. This is Carly over here, the new kid on the block when it comes to Sesame Street, and also the face of America's addiction crisis.
My mom was away for a while because she had a grown-up problem.
I love my mom so much, and she couldn't take good care of me because she was having such a tough time.
Now, Carly, 6.5 years old, is joining the show as part of Sesame Street's community series, and this is actually a supplemental program.
Now, I believe the child that's in the frame here,
as part of Sesame Street.
She's actually supposedly one of her parents actually had opioid addiction. So I'm not belittling the whole notion that this might be, at least therapeutic for the kid or whatever. But it's a puppet whose parent had an opioid addiction. I don't see why people can't acknowledge that it's pretty funny because it's a puppet. It's a puppet. We used to remember Jeff Dunham, the comedian that had Ahmed the terrorist as a puppet, and people were able to live through that. I mean, if you make something into a puppet, in my opinion, by that point, it becomes an object of ridicule. I don't care how serious the subject matter is.
Sesame Street's community series, and this is actually a supplemental program that is free, and a lot of people have been buzzing about this. She is actually with a foster family currently in the show because of parents' addiction, and just to put this in
yeah, they misspelled addiction here. Shows how much they take it seriously. They say a parent's addition.
Perspective a little bit. Nearly 6 million kids under the age of 11 deal with this very issue. So online, a lot of people have been giving shout outs to Sesame Street for shedding a spotlight on this issue. But on the other side of the coin, some wondering if this is really appropriate for a kids show. Now, some say topics like this have been tackled in the past, so this is really no different. But is it for you? Use that hashtag MorningRushATL. We're going to continue to follow the conversation and want to hear from you this morning, Christy.
All right, thanks a lot, Liza. It is 5:36.
Yes, God forbid you criticize the opioid addiction puppet or actually laugh at it because it's a puppet. That's really the problem that I'm having. And look, I want you guys to sound off. Am I going to hell because I laughed at a puppet? I don't care if first of all, it's a fictional character. Second of all, a puppet doesn't have any parents. It's a piece of foam that's been sewn together with eyes and friggin' pom poms. There's no reason not to laugh at a puppet, right? There's the whole point of having a puppet is to be an object of ridicule. So I wanted to open with that. I was wondering what would be kind of your reaction to it. Leave a comment later if you're watching this on replay. Another thing that's been going on, this will probably be the focus for most of the rest of the day, is obviously the NBA China thing. Before that, I guess I have to turn off ad blocker just to watch this, but we have the article. We don't even need it. Before that, we'll go through NFL picks just because I feel like it. So Panthers versus Buccaneers. I think for that I believe I even picked Tampa for that. You have the Bengals at the Ravens. That's obviously going to be the Ravens. Seahawks at Browns. I think I'm really on the fence about this. I guess because the Browns did so poorly last week against San Francisco, I can't pick the Browns. I'm sorry. You wanna believe a team will change, but then every week they show a little reason why there's something of the old team left. And no, I'm gonna pick, I guess, Seattle, although it's a hard one. Texans at the Chiefs, that's gonna be easy. Kansas City, Saints at Jaguars, gonna pick New Orleans. Sorry for all you in Duval County. Eagles at Vikings. You know what? I would like to pick the Vikings, but I can't have any. I don't have any confidence in Carson Palmer as a quarterback until I see him really do something special. So I will have to pick the Eagles, even though I really, really, really want him to lose, and I need him to lose. Redskins at Dolphins. You're not going to hell for mocking a puppet. You're going to help because you're a Jew. Well, thank you. I like helping people, Mr. Wazo. Redskins at Dolphins. I think I'm going to pick... Oh, my God. People did pick the Dolphins. I thought people would say, well, the Dolphins are tanking anyway. So, yeah. I think I'll pick the Dolphins. Even then, so if you're not picking the Dolphins to win, I think at least you're picking them against the spread. I think this might be a close game. 49ers at Rams. You're going to get, I think, well, it's in LA. I think the Rams would be able to hold Jimmy Garoppolo to a little lower of a score than Cleveland did last week. I'm going with LA. Yeah, it's too late, Mr. Wazo. You said your piece already. Falcons at Cardinals. That's obviously going to be. Well, you know what? I'll pick the Cardinals. I'll pick the underdog. Yeah, I'm not picking the Falcons this year. They're garbage. Cowboys at Jets. If my Dallas Cowboys do not win today, they have to fire Jason Garrett. No questions asked. They're playing this garbage team with Sam Darnold. I am going to not pick the Jets as long as I think the Jets might be as bad as any other team in the league, except maybe the Dolphins, who are trying to tank. There's a few teams that are so bad, like Washington has proven itself to be just a dumpster fire the entire year, but you could probably say Washington's a couple rungs above the Dolphins. I think the Jets might be right there with the Dolphins, if not maybe like a couple millimeters higher in terms of pathetic play. I saw them play Cleveland on Monday Night Football, and the fact is that game should have been a 30-point beatdown, and it was only a 20-point beatdown. Their defense is, I guess, a little better than people give them credit for, but they're not going anywhere. Le'Veon Bell has done nothing for the team, and they're going to compete for the first-round pick, assuming, of course, that they can manage to lose a game to Miami, which, there's no reason to think that can't happen. Somebody actually picked the Jets. I guess my Cowboys are really, they're mailing it in this year. 3-2. But that was an awful game against the Packers last week. I wanted to crawl into a hole and die after the third quarter. Of course, they came back and made it a lot closer in the fourth, and then there was that ridiculous end of the drive where they missed the second field goal of the day. So yeah, Dallas has they have no more slack to give this week. And how many more games we got here? Titans at Broncos. That's going to be Tennessee for me. Steelers at Chargers. Picking the Chargers all the way. The Steelers are basically gutted. Everyone's picking the Chargers except for these two idiots over here on CBS. And then the Lions and the Packers. Look, I really want the Packers to lose, but I don't think they're going to. They're playing at home. The Lions have historically not been very good against them, so yeah, it's going to be Packers. So I figured I'd do that, even though I don't even do weekly live streams anyway. But since it's Sunday, and you'll probably be wondering, I'm actually there is one other religious holiday today, or tonight rather. So I'm gonna miss part of the Cowboys game. So for the next 2 days, I'm just gonna be kind of gone. Not gonna be doing any live streams or writing or anything. I did submit another article for publication for the Federalist, by the way, but we'll see if it gets published. They don't just accept everything you put out. It's not like it's not like Hustler magazine or something. That's a last generation joke that most people will probably yawn at. Did anybody see? I know Mr. Wazo's in the chat, so I know his sense of humor is a little close to mine. Did you see People versus Larry Flint, where they were talking about the Jerry Falwell cartoon? I thought that was pretty funny. As a person, I don't think I really like Larry Flint. Now, to the meat of the day, the real topic. So we're going to talk a little bit about the NBA, maybe about the whole Biden controversy, Biden/impeachment/ deep state. We'll see how much of it we get to. I am supposed to go do something, but haven't received any calls about it. So we'll see how long I can stay. We'll start with this ridiculous situation with the NBA. I get these pop-ups you see here, these are the same pop-ups every day, and I don't know how to uninstall it. Maybe it's sending me some sort of subliminal message that I'm really out of shape. So it says here the NBA is going to have to choose. Pro basketball was a progressive beacon, allowing players and coaches to speak their mind freely. And then China got involved. Written by Jamel Hill, who normally I pretty much I hate her, and I find her to be ridiculous. Mr. Wazo says, you didn't see that movie? I saw his pic of SE Cup. I'll have to check that out. Actually, SE Cup is really annoying. I don't think I'll check it out. I think SE Cup is kind of a bitch. Doesn't she work for CNN anyway? The NBA reveled in the praise it got for being the sports league that welcomed its players and employees' opinions on political and social issues. But the league's respect for open expression, which supposedly distinguished it from the NFL, suddenly has its limits. A posting on Twitter Friday by the Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey, showing support for the Hong Kong protesters, has fractured the relationship between the National Basketball Association and its business partners in China, a country with deep pockets and an insatiable thirst for the sport. The tweet featured an image bearing the caption, "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong." It wasn't up for long, but it was enough to jeopardize the NBA's growing ties with the Chinese Basketball Association and Chinese corporations. Now the NBA is trying desperately to mollify China, which will accept no criticism of its embarrassing human rights record, while also paying lip service to Morey's right to express himself. This strategy is working quite miserably. A few years ago, when the National Football League struggled to deal with the quarterback Colin Kaepernick and other players who protested police brutality by taking a knee during the national anthem, the NBA often was held up as a counterexample. The Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban went so far as to brag that if Kaepernick were an NBA player, his viewpoints would have been welcomed. I'd like to think we encourage our players to exercise their constitutional rights, Cuban once told the Washington Post. Some of the biggest names in the NBA, from LeBron James to the Golden State Warriors coach Steve Kerr, have been extremely critical of President Donald Trump, and the NBA's response has been to give them the space to say what they believe. But criticizing China is a different story. As a result of Maury's tweet, the Rockets, who have been highly visible in China ever since they drafted the Chinese basketball legend Yao Ming in 2002, lost many of their sponsors from China and are banned from being shown in the country. Wow. Well, so that's only the Rockets, I guess. The Chinese Basketball Association, the high-profile league that Yao now leads, is suspending its relationship with the Rockets. Maury has since backpedaled. For the NBA, smoothing things over with Chinese officials means capitulating in a way that compromises the values it regularly espouses, values that have endeared the league to many of its fans in America. Let me see here. He photoshopped a dick into S.E. Cup's mouth. She had a fit of... Yeah, that's something she would get. Look, if he did that in Hustler magazine and she reacted to it, she basically took the bait. They were trying to get a reaction out of her. Most people don't care what S.E. Cup thinks anyway. The league put out an abject statement on Sunday that read, "We recognize that the views expressed by Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey have been deeply offended by the views expressed." So this doesn't even make sense. "We recognize that the views expressed by Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey have been deeply offended, have deeply offended many of our friends and fans in China, which is regrettable." I thought it said something different. While Daryl has made it clear that his tweet does not represent the Rockets or the NBA, the values of the league support individuals educating themselves and sharing their views on matters important to them. We have great respect for the history and culture of China and hope that sports and the NBA can be used as a unifying force to bridge cultural divides and bring people together. Several notable politicians, including some presidential candidates, took to social media to criticize the NBA for its response. Senator Ted Cruz, a Republican from Texas, tweeted his support for Maury, and Maury probably tweeted back, "You're not helping." And the Democratic presidential candidate, Elizabeth Warren, accused the NBA of choosing its pocketbook over its principles. It's not a coincidence that some Republican politicians, such as Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, delight in pouncing on the NBA, while NFL executives lived in fear that Kaepernick's protests would offend conservative white fans and conservative white owners. Pro basketball didn't seem to mind taking sides on political issues. Since Trump has been in office, not one NBA team has taken the customary trip to the White House to commemorate winning a league championship. Mr. Wazo says, "I heard China has 500 million NBA fans. That is why they won't talk bad about China." Well, there's actually, I've picked a couple clips to look through, and I think I'll look at a third one, which is by Jason Whitlock, which is actually brilliant. Now that you're talking about it, Mr. Wazo, I was looking at it a little earlier before I put together some stuff for this live stream. But Rubio and others are right about this. It's much harder to stand on principle when that principle interferes with business relationships worth billions of dollars. The NBA recently signed a 5-year extension, reportedly valued at $1.5 billion with the China-based digital giant Tencent Holdings, which now won't be including the Rockets as part of its coverage. NBA players have found China to be fertile financial ground. Several NBA stars, this is interesting, including LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Steph Curry, and the Rockets guard James Harden regularly visit China to promote their merchandise and pad their pockets. Players, including the recently retired superstar Dwayne Wade, she misspelled Dwayne Wade's name, Dwayne Wade, have signed lucrative shoe deals with Chinese brands. Likely wanting to protect his own business interests in China, Harden did not stand with his GM. He apologized to Chinese citizens following a team practice in Tokyo where the Rockets are playing preseason games. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver issued a detailed statement before today's preseason games in Tokyo in an attempt to further clarify that the league is standing behind Maury's right to free speech. Silver surely realized that the league's initial characterization of Maury's tweet as regrettable didn't exactly denote support. The problem for the NBA is that it isn't just a free speech issue. This is a test to see whether the NBA has the stomach to fight for certain values when doing so compromises business. It's true that American businesses often do business with global partners whose values and practices were in counter to America's. But the NBA has set a different tone with its business because of its social and political engagement and by being one of the most globally conscious professional sports leagues. As Silver noted in today's statement, 25% of NBA players were born outside the United States. That's actually, I would say that's a good thing. It's good that there's more players from all over the world in the NBA. I think it was great that baseball had a lot of players from Japan and from Dominican Republic and even from Australia now. I think it's great. Some people think it's bad. Some people think, oh, that means that less players from here will get into the league. Well, what do you want? We want baseball to be popular all over the world. I do. I could give a shit about the NBA personally because most of the NBA is garbage basketball anyway. The whole season is a fucking joke. And then you get to the playoffs, and some of the playoffs is interesting, and then you get to the finals, and maybe once in a while there's a decent NBA finals. But I think it's great that baseball is popular in Japan, and I hope it gets popular elsewhere too. Al Silver noted in today's statement, 25% of NBA players were born outside the United States. In fact, one of those players is Turkish-born Enes Kanter, the Celtics center who faces criminal charges in Turkey for publicly criticizing Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Kanter's father, Mehmet, was sentenced to 15 years in prison for membership in a terrorist group. Enes, whose passport was canceled by the Turkish government, he has said he believes that his father was targeted because of his opposition to the president. So, without getting into further detail, because from what I understood, Kanter's dad was not actually a terrorist. He just had a membership in one of these opposition organizations. That's an example of someone who's actually had to suffer for political opposition, right? I think it's ridiculous that you have a guy who didn't commit any crimes and his passport was canceled because his dad supposedly did something. And another thing, people forget that while this whole Kaepernick controversy was going on, in baseball, Miguel Cabrera's mom was kidnapped by colectivos who are pro-government militias in Venezuela. So people forget about people think that it's so brave what Kaepernick did. It's so brave what some of these other NBA stars did. There was the whole running out of the tunnel with your hands up that the St. Louis Rams at the time did. And then they, like a year later, they moved to LA, showing how much they really cared about the city of St. Louis. So those are very, very easy stances to take when you don't have anything at risk. But some of these people do risk a lot. These people who actually have families and friends and relatives living in those countries. In the NBA, the commissioner dances in a float at New York City's Pride Parade. Ew. that sounds like Adam Silver to me. This is the same league that delayed holding the NBA All-Star weekend in Charlotte, North Carolina for 2 years because the state enacted legislation denying transgender people the right to use the bathroom of the gender that they identify with. The so-called bathroom bill was later repealed. This is a league that ousted Donald Sterling, the former Los Angeles Clippers owner whose racist comments were caught on a recording. While Sterling's removal certainly could be characterized as a business decision because players were threatening to boycott unless Sterling was removed, the league still garnered widespread applause for it. Yeah, I remember that. And by the way, at the time, I was on sort of the other side of the aisle. I was saying, yeah, I think he should be removed from the league because why would people want to play for the guy? And in reality, when I thought about it a little later, as much as I thought Donald Sterling was a pig and a disgusting person, things that he said that were recorded in private shouldn't have affected his standing in the league. And it was basically used to blackmail him by his ex-girlfriend. I was wrong. And Sterling should have probably been able to. It's a tough situation. I guess the NBA has a right to kick people out of the league that they don't like, but it's very ironic that Sterling was banned for things that he said in private that were recorded by a mistress, and you have a lot of these other NBA owners who are basically, they're very, very, very corrupt politically. You have people like, I think Roman Abramovich of the Brooklyn Nets has done. He's just this Russian oligarch or whatever. They don't care about that. On American soil, the NBA is fearless, which makes the league's defensive crouch now all the more conspicuous. The Ringer reported that Morey's job is in jeopardy. The NBA and the Rockets would be foolish to let China bully them into such a drastic decision, but the Chinese seem to have no intention of compromising, as Silver hopes. China's state television network announced it won't be broadcasting the NBA's preseason games this week because Silver still supports Morey's right to free speech. On Monday morning, China's Education Bureau abruptly canceled a charitable event involving the NBA and the Brooklyn Nets. Well, I think that might have been for their benefit because the Nets are garbage. So good for the Chinese, I guess. ESPN's Rachel Nichols reported NBA representatives in China wouldn't elaborate on why the event was canceled, but naturally the speculation was that this was related to Morey's comments. If the Chinese continue to take a hardline stance with the NBA, the league must take a more forceful stand against them. Maybe to the point where league officials must reassess whether it's even possible to have a healthy business relationship with China without compromising the ideals that have made their brand unique in professional sports. If the NBA buckles to China, that merely shows that the league will fight for its values only if no real sacrifice is involved. And then look at this note at the bottom. This article is part of, quote, the Speech Wars, a project supported by the Charles Koch Foundation, the Reporters Committee for the Freedom of the Press, and the Fetzer Institute. So, yes, Jemele Hill is a Koch brothers shill. She's dirty. She's completely corrupted. She's like the black female Dave Rubin. No, I'm kidding. I don't care. It is kind of funny, though, that Atlantic is taking money from the Kochs in order to... can they get any more twisted about what they really believe? I actually don't care about the Koch brothers personally, but a lot of people seem to think that they have their fingers in everything. I do oppose a lot of what the Koch brothers believed in. Isn't one of them dead? Who cares? When the guy died, I think David Koch is the one that's still alive, and Charles Koch died. When he died, I think it was Charles Koch who died. I was like watching Styx Hexenhammer, and he was laying into the guy because apparently a lot of these very open borders libertarians were talking about, oh, he's one of the nicest people ever, and he gave a lot of money to charity, and he gave money to these hospitals and whatever. I think that you can always look at people for the merits of what they did, and then ignore some of the bad things they did. I personally don't care. I'm not happy that Charles Koch is dead, but I'm also not exactly crestfallen. He lived a very, very long time, and I guess you could say he lived a full life, and I'm not sad. The guy was like 81 years old. So it's still funny that the Atlantic took money for that article. So this was actually a good article by Jemele Hill. If she is being consistent, and you can't say that about everyone. And I have to give her applause for it, even though I kind of am surprised, and it's a little suspicious that it was part of a Koch brothers project, which you would think. She's kind of sold her soul in that respect, but I agree with what you said, at least. Here's what Clay Travis had to say. I think I put it at the right mark.
In carrying water for the most shameless and
Hold
shameful
on.
show that Rachel Nichols is currently appearing. A little bit later than normal today because I wanted to watch The Jump, which is ESPN's live show about the NBA, which I don't know if it's taped or not, the aspects of the show that Rachel Nichols is currently appearing on from Shanghai. So the show is, I think, live, but she may be taped. I don't know. Regardless, this is one of, if not the most shameless and shameful performances I have ever seen by a sports television network in carrying water for the NBA and in carrying water for China. This was effectively a PR infomercial from China. Zero opinion, zero analysis. This is pathetic. Rachel Nichols went on ESPN when the NBA pulled the All-Star game from Charlotte, North Carolina, and compared that heroic decision to the lunch counter sit-ins in the 1960s. She praised the NBA to the high heavens over what was a thoroughly absurd decision that is now coming back to bite them in the ass, just like the decision to remove the word owner did. If you are going to be an uber woke, uber politically active organization, then if you're going to stand up to people over the use of the word owner, and if you are going to analyze individual state legislation and decide to relocate your All-Star game over that, then by God, you cannot do what the NBA is doing right now in allowing China to kick its ass all over the place. China came out today and said, and I quote, they are still angry at the NBA. They have pulled all of the NBA preseason games off of Chinese television, and they said, and I quote, we are strongly dissatisfied and opposed Adams' claim. They didn't even give him his last name. Adams' claim to support Maury's rights of free expression. We believe, this is what China said now, we believe that any speech that challenges national sovereignty and social stability is not within the scope of freedom of speech. Hold on a minute. China has lost its damn mind. All right? This is where the NBA and all the other woke sports media should be saying, wait a minute. China just told the NBA, and I quote, we believe that any speech that challenges national sovereignty and social stability is not within the scope of freedom of speech. What they say did that? Houston Rockets GM Daryl Morey saying, I believe in democracy effectively. If you are the NBA and you are a reporter who covers the NBA, if you are a player, if you are a coach, if you are an executive, you cannot stand on the sideline here when America's embrace of democracy is being challenged. This is a time where any journalist with a brain, a soul, or any semblance of balls would step up and call out the NBA for not standing up for itself and for American values. And any company, and I got Disney square in my sights here, any company that allows that broadcast that I just watched live from China to exist cannot be trusted at all because they have sold their soul so far down the river that they aren't even allowing their reporters to say what they actually believe. Because I refuse to believe that Rachel Nichols could be such a huge hypocrite that she could compare the transgender bathroom bill to the civil rights sit-ins and not say a damn word when China says we don't believe in freedom of speech, we don't believe in democracy, and the NBA has to bend the knee and apologize to us, and the NBA so far has done it. Adam Silver is pathetic. he is looking like a lame loser who is unwilling to stand up for the country that has made him fabulously wealthy. And I got to tell you, the idea that Disney would sell out to protect the NBA and its relationships with China is the entire basis of a South Park episode that Trey Parker and Matt Stone absolutely nailed. There are some aspects of American society that are undeniable, whether you are a Democrat, whether you are a Republican, whether you are an independent. And that is, in my opinion, the primacy of the right of free speech. So you may not agree with what Daryl Morey said, but by God, if you are Adam Silver, if you are Rachel Nichols, if you are anybody that is a red-blooded American, you got to go to the wall to defend their right to say whatever they believe. And if you are a player, if you are James Harden, you can't show up and apologize. James Harden apologized for his boss, Daryl Morey, embracing democracy. He apologized to China for that. And Steve Kerr, who has opinions on every political issue that has existed in the last 3 years. Steve Kerr's out here with immigration policy opinions. Steve Kerr's out here with gun control opinions. Steve Kerr's out here analyzing every single tweet that Donald Trump sends all day long, every day. And do you know what happened? When Steve Kerr was asked if he had any comment on the situation in China.
All right, let's pause that. I really like Clay Travis mostly. I kind of turn to him for most of my sports news, and especially if it's sports and politics. Now, before we get to his analysis of it, we'll just play what Steve Kerr did say, which was not especially, it wasn't exactly his fierce moment.
Obviously, the big story in the league right now is Daryl Morey's tweet and everything going on with China. Do you have any thoughts on that situation?
Actually, I don't. I mean, it's a really bizarre international story, and a lot of us don't know what to make of it.
So he's not even speaking up. He's basically mumbling into the. He sounds like I would if I was if I was talking into the microphone. I'm a mumbler, by the way. Usually I don't speak like I do on YouTube.
So it's something I'm reading about, and just like everybody is, but I'm not going to comment further than that.
How challenging is that for you at this point? I mean, I'm sure there's you may want to comment on something.
No, I mean, actually,
No, it's not that hard. It's very easy to know who pays your bills and who is basically funding my third mortgage on a beach house in the Caymans.
Found is that it's easy to speak on issues that I'm passionate about and I feel like I'm well versed on, and I've found that it makes the most sense to stick to topics that are that fall in that category. So I try to keep my comments to those things, but so it's not difficult.
I try to keep my comments to topics that don't affect my stock portfolio.
Or I'm just trying to learn. My brother-in-law is actually a Chinese history professor, and I emailed him today to tell me what I should be learning about all this and what's happening. So I'm trying to learn just like everybody else is.
Steve, to that point, has the league said anything to coaches and players about not saying anything?
No, nobody has said anything to us from the league or from the organization about whether we can comment or not comment.
Nobody needs to tell me how to recognize which side of my bread is buttered.
Is it something you would bring up with the guys?
A little bit, you know, we a couple of the guys and I talked about it today, more out of you know, just hey, did you see that, and what do you think, type thing, but you know, not a team-wide discussion.
Did you see Maury's tweet?
No.
So yeah, I think that was a very interesting reaction from Mr. Steve Kerr, and apparently this happened a couple of days ago, and you know, I don't really care because I don't care about the NBA anyway, and I mean, if the Portland Trailblazers don't want to do business with a company that works with the IDF, fine, but they did apparently end a relationship with. It says here, following publication of this report, the Trailblazers issued a statement saying the partnership was severed by Leopold and Stevens and was not motivated by protests from BDS activists, as some websites sympathetic to the movement have claimed. Okay, so that's interesting. The Trailblazers had a partnership with Leopold and Stevens in support of the Hometown Hero program. The program, which will continue on despite the end of the Leopold partnership, honors the brave men and women of our country, of our nation's armed forces, first responders, and other everyday heroes who put service above it before self. Leopold's sponsorship contract officially expired at the end of last season, and Leopold and Stevens made the decision not to renew. That's a little strange because why would you not? Their decision was business related, not influenced by external pressure as being misreported by certain media outlets. Leopold and Stevens was a great partner, and we wish them success for the future. I don't really know why the company would sever or would decide not to renew the relationship with the Portland Trailblazers. Maybe the Trailblazers raised their fees, but it says the Portland Trailblazers announced that they have severed relations with a company that does business with Israel following a pressure campaign by activists tied to the anti-Semitic boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. So they're calling it anti-Semitic. I usually say the BDS movement is, you know, there's a lot of anti-Semites who support it, but, you know, in and of itself, boycott, the BDS movement, I guess you could say, includes anti-Semites, but it also includes people who simply don't like Israel, which, you know, it's a very fine line, and let's not get into that. But this is labeled by the Washington Free Beacon as anti-Semitic, which a lot of people do, and I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. As the NBA is facing outrage after the general manager of the Houston Rockets capitulated to censorship by the Chinese Communist government, the Trailblazers quietly severed ties with the manufacturer Leopold, which has a contract to produce accessories for the Israeli Defense Forces. Trailblazers president and CEO Chris McGowan recently announced a decision to bow to pressure from BDS activists, telling a reporter for the Bleacher Report that Leopold is no longer a part of the organization. The move was celebrated by anti-Israel activists and picked up by the pro-BDS blog Mondoweiss. So Mondoweiss is a very pro-BDS website, which is basically, it's owned by a couple very anti-Israel Jews, which stated that the decision came after a year-long campaign by local activists to pressure the Blazers to drop the sponsor. So it's auspicious timing. I think it's interesting. The NBA has been facing fierce backlash following the fallout from the Rockets incident. The controversy erupted after the Rockets general manager tweeted and subsequently. So you saw that already. So it's kind of a question. The Trailblazers are now they're claiming that it had nothing to do with the BDS campaign, but the pro-BDS activists are saying that it absolutely had to do with it, and they'd been calling for this for a while. So I think it's very, very auspicious timing, but we'll have to see whether that's true. If it is true, then that is extreme cowardice on the part of this NBA franchise, that they're not, they're going to sever a sponsorship with a company. Remember, this is a company that does business with Israel, okay? And I guess it's their right to do that. But at the same time, they do cuck to China. And I will say a lot of the rationale that's been going into this is clearly not motivated by human rights, and it's not motivated either by this notion that, we're respecting Chinese culture, okay? I don't think a single person who is involved in any of the decision making is holding back because they have a deep respect for Chinese culture. I think China is a fantastic civilization, but it's gone through many cycles of implosion. You know, there's been so many different regimes that came to power in China and then imploded from within, and were either conquered from outside. You know, the Mongols conquered China for about 200 years, and then there were the Mings and whatever. So the Mings also fell apart and were consumed by the Manchu or the Qing dynasty. And then there was the revolution, and ultimately 30 years later, there's the communist takeover. So in short, this notion that, oh, we're going to hold back because we don't know the intricacies of this old civilization, that, you know, there's many very complicated factors in China. Imagine if I was to say that 8 years ago, when there was the Arab Spring happening in Egypt, I would say, hey, don't criticize the Mubarak government. Think about how many thousands and thousands of years of history, going back to the pharaohs in Egypt, that we don't understand as Americans. We should just let them work out their issues as a sovereign country. I think a lot of people would have laughed at that. Now, I guess it's a way to look at it. Certainly there's people who believe in that type of stance, and that's fine. It's not a consistent stance on the part of the NBA or on the part of the media. Typically what they'll do is they'll pick and choose which situations to wade into based on their own narrow interests. MC says, Communist China doesn't respect their culture. Why should anyone else? That's a fair point. The same country, the same regime that rules China today, about 40 to 50 years ago, was saying we're going to destroy the four olds, the old literature, old culture, old everything. They hated Chinese culture. The worst enemy of Chinese culture, not so long ago, was China. They hated it. Let me see if I can find this clip where this is Jason Whitlock. I think Whitlock is also pretty intelligent in terms of there. I almost flubbed the line, but yeah, here we go. This is on Tucker Carlson.
Whitlock is the host of Speak for Yourself on Fox Sports 1, and he joins us tonight. So, Jason,
the reason I think Jason Whitlock feels so free to speak for himself is because I think he's the size of a Humvee. So if anybody tries to attack him, I think he has plenty of padding. He could probably withstand a real beating in real life. So, I don't think that he's afraid of anyone, although I could be wrong. I think he's been threatened with firings before.
seems inexcusable behavior from the NBA. What's your view of it?
Well, I think the cultural impact that China's influence over a great sport, a great American sport like basketball, is just now being exposed, and just how dependent the NBA is on the Chinese economy and Chinese money to put on the appearance of how great the league is doing. Without the Chinese money and without, because you really have to understand the shoe companies, Nike, Adidas, they run American basketball from the high school level all the way to the pros, and the shoe companies are dependent on the China market. And that's where all of this is coming from. You see NBA players constantly over the summer during their offseason running to China to do the bidding of their shoe companies and to sell their shoes in the China market. And so the NBA is really being exposed as not nearly as much of American business as it is a global business, with China perhaps having more influence over it than even America.
which is shocking given that, of course, and it's shocking because I don't think most people know that, but also shocking given that the NBA was, of course, incubated in this country. Wouldn't have been possible in any other. Basketball was invented in Springfield, Massachusetts in a YMCA. It's the most American of all sports. And I don't know that there's any basketball arena that wasn't subsidized by American taxpayers. So, like, how could they possibly take this position?
Well, Tucker, the cultural impact of this and what a great teachable moment it is for most American citizens. When people start talking about being a global citizen, I don't think people really understand what that means for American culture. And I think for a lot of the everyday, typical American sports fan, this is an educational experience. This is what people have been talking about. We can't let our corporations, our country being totally driven by China because it's driving our culture. These basketball players, LeBron James, James Harden actually apologized on behalf of Daryl Morey to the Chinese government. We're apologizing to a communist government, and then we have athletes here and coaches like Steve Kerr and Greg Popovich that rail against our government. We're the bad guys in the minds of these NBA players and coaches and their little parade of being so woke. All of it, to me, is at the behest of the shoe companies. They're doing the bidding of the shoe companies and protecting China and demonizing us and our culture and dramatically changing our culture because these athletes are young. And I'm not giving them an excuse, but they're young. Right. Many of them didn't go to college or only spent a year or two in college. They don't understand how they're being used and played to promote a communist, a Marxist agenda. They have no idea that their actions and a lot of the things they're promoting, this victim mentality and all the identity politics and, everything in America's racist, all of that, it's all a scam by the shoe companies. Look how socially aware we are. Look how we fight against injustice. No, you're actually doing a marketing ploy to pretend you have a social conscience, and you're actually doing the bidding of the communist regime in China.
Yeah, maybe the single most racist government in the world. It's literally an ethno-state, and here's the socially conscious NBA sucking up. Very quick, it's a little shocking to me that Kerr, of all people, who never hesitates to give his opinion, is often lauded for it, can't manage to say that he takes Hong Kong's side?
Tucker, these guys can rail against our government, our president, and be applauded for it. They don't have the courage to speak out against a communist government, all kinds of human rights violations. It's the epitome of hypocrisy and cowardice.
It really is. And thank you for putting it in context with the shoe companies. I think that's the most interesting thing I've heard in a long time. Jason Whitlock, good to see you tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think Whitlock is largely he's large, but I think he is very accurate when talking about the pressure given the manufacturing placement of China and the fact that a lot of the market for those shoes is in China. I think it's very good that he's bringing it to that. I think Tucker's statement that China is an ethno-state is an exaggeration. There's a lot of different ethnic groups in China. Obviously, one ethnic group really, really dominates, which is the Han Chinese. And there's no reason that it wouldn't be that way. But, look, I think that people have to decide at a certain point what they expect out of American athletes, okay? I think that if American athletes do want to have a social belief system that they put out to the public, I don't really have a problem with that. Even if sometimes it's like really ridiculous shit. There was a guy, Chris Kluwe, who was a punter for the Vikings, who all the time would just complain about, the gays aren't getting enough rights. Gay marriage should be like I don't know. He was like extremely pissed off that gay marriage was not legal, and he was campaigning for it, and he's like, I'm not gay, but gay marriage is should be like everybody should be, and whatever. And then eventually the Vikings cut him a while later. And then he complained, well, they don't want me on the team because I support gay marriage. And the fact is that, dude, you're a punter in the NFL, and nobody cares about your points of view. You're just a punter. Nobody gives a shit. All well and good. I don't think he ever played another down in the NFL. I could be wrong. Let me check here. Chris Cluey. So he was talking about this for a long time. I think he ended up playing as on the practice squad with the Raiders the next year, and the practice squad means that you're basically on call if their punter gets injured. And no, if you have a very, very strong social stance on something, that doesn't guarantee you a placement in sports. Tim Tebow did not get more gigs as a quarterback just because he was a very strong Christian. So it's not skewed to the right for sure. And it's also not, it shouldn't be skewed to the left. I don't think that people are saying, oh, it's ridiculous that in a league where Mason Rudolph just got knocked out, and I think the Steelers are starting this guy like Marcus Hodge or something. I don't even know his name. I think his last name is Hodge, and the Steelers are so, they're so thin at quarterback. So people are saying, well, why don't they sign Colin Kaepernick? Well, maybe they should sign him, and maybe they also have a choice of whether they want to sign him or not. If they're thinking, well, we're going to tank the year so that we can essentially get whatever high draft pick there is next year, Tua Tagovailoa or whoever it is, or maybe, if they're looking even longer term, they might want to draft, what's his name, Travis Frederick, 2 years from now. That's their prerogative. You can't just say, well, this person says really important shit, so he should be playing in the NBA or the NFL or Major League Baseball or whatever. That's not the way that a free society works. So I think that people have to make up their mind. I think a lot of people are complaining, well, why aren't these people talking about China? Well, a lot of us didn't want them talking about some of the stuff they're talking about here. So you have to decide whether you do believe that professional athletes should have political stances and campaigns, or you don't. But certainly, I think I have to give credit to Jemele Hill for saying it. She also went on CNN and said it to Jake Tapper. So for once, I do want to say, if I would like, just laugh at her because she's been full of crap for so many years, I wouldn't be fair. So I think it's good for her that she took this stance, even though apparently it was an article that was paid as part of a Koch brothers series. But look, these athletes who have for years marketed themselves as these amazing leaders of the community. You had LeBron James do that stupid, I think it was like 17 minutes long, this Uber commercial in 2018, where he was in a car with Kevin Durant in the back seat with Kerry Champion driving, and they were talking about racial issues in an Uber commercial for 17 minutes. That shows really how they get their voice. They get their voice when somebody sprinkles a little cash on the right side. They get Taco Tuesday, if anybody's heard of this. LeBron James, I believe, tried to sue Taco John in order to get, he wanted to get the Taco Tuesday he wanted to trademark Taco Tuesday, and it had already been trademarked. So LeBron James trademarked it now. It could be bad news for Taco John's. So yeah, this guy, it's all about him. It's all about his ego. That's it. So that's about it for today. Please like, share, and subscribe. I will probably be back in touch after Wednesday or after Tuesday night. And I'll talk to you guys later. Have a great Sunday.